Hello, I'm Locke, Meredith. I'd like to invite you to join me on the next Legal Lines where my guest, Dr. Loren Scott, he's a professor emeritus from LSU Economics Department. He's going to talk to us about the economy of the United States of America and of the state of Louisiana. It's been pretty bad for the last 8 years, and he's going to talk about what he thinks is going to happen with changes because of President-elect Trump. He's also going to talk to us about the bright spots we have in Louisiana, particularly the gas industry, and how it is slamming the rest of the world in terms of services and prices. So join us on the next Legal Lines with Dr. Loren Scott.
It's time now for Legal Lines Tips with your host, Locke Meredith.
Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I have a Legal Lines tip for you. Remember, knowledge is power. And I want you to know if you're injured, Louisiana law grants you a variety of claims to make sure you're fully compensated. It's generally chopped up into several categories, the first being general damages. That's going to compensate you for your mental and physical pain and suffering, your scarring, disability, functional limitations, your loss of enjoyment of life. Also, it will compensate your family, frankly, for your loss of affection. It's called loss of consortium claim. Next category is specific damages. Those would be, say, for example, past and future lost wages, past and future medical expenses. You also have a claim sometimes for what's called punishment damages or punitive damages, typically only available when you're injured by a drunk party. Finally, you're entitled to legal interest from the date you file your lawsuit until you're paid and court costs. So my Legal Lines tip to you from me, Locke Meredith, make sure you know what your claims are.
This has been Legal Lines Tips with your host, Locke Meredith.
Hello, welcome to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith, and I'm very pleased to have back on the show Dr. Loren Scott. He is a PhD in economics, a professor emeritus at LSU, and been doing this a long time. Dr. Scott, it's great to see you.
Glad to be here. Glad to be here.
Well, let's kind of tell the folks real quick. I mean, you have credentials that could take up 40 pages, but you're quite educated and quite outstanding and prolific writer. Tell the folks a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you for saying that. You know, I got my PhD back when the Earth's crust was just cooling off, and then came to LSU. Was at LSU for almost 30 years, teaching the economics department, writing and doing research there. And started writing the Louisiana Economic Outlook back in the latter part of the 70s, and have been doing that ever since. Matter of fact, we just released, I think, the 38th edition of the Louisiana Economic Outlook, about 100 pages long.
And I saw you taught, what, 33 years?
Yeah, about 33, yeah, at LSU.
Chairman of the economics department for 13?
Yeah, chairman of the economics department for a while. We had a really great run then. We had a great dean, and we were able to move our ranking in the United States from 101st to 39th, which was really great. Had a lot of great people helping us out with that.
I didn't know this. There's 3,000 universities considered in that, and we went from 101 to 38.
To 38, yeah. It was really a great time period. We had a very supportive dean, very supportive administration at LSU, and it was just a great time to be chairman.
And of course, you've traveled all over the nation. I saw you had even been interviewed or spoke in Moscow. You are an advisor and a consultant to Exxon and all the big boy companies all over the nation and world. So we want to tap your expertise in your brain a little bit.
Sure.
When we last spoke, we were talking off record here a little while ago. That was 2012, and things pretty much didn't look real bright. We had a hard economic decline. There was very little recovery taking place. Doesn't seem like much has changed in 4 years.
It really wasn't. This is, again, the good news is we have numbers to support all this. What we had, we've been through about 6 recoveries since World War II. This was the worst recovery we've ever come through.
Is it worse than the Depression?
Well, World War II. Great Depression occurred before that. It occurred in the 30s. But it took, for example, if you look at the average recovery out of the previous, say, 6 recessions we've been through since World War II, the average growth in real gross domestic product was 22%. It was 11% during the Obama years. It was just awful. If you look at things like personal income growth it actually declined, but what little growth there was tiny compared to previous recovery. So it was just really, it was a very bad time period. The loss of employment, number one, the loss of employment was way more than we should have had. We should not have had that much of a loss of employment. But it took us like, I want to say 74 months to get all the employment back. So if you look at the recovery from the previous recessions, you go down, pop right back up. This one went down, stayed down, took forever to get all the jobs back we lost during the Great Recession. So it was not a good time period.
You know, you're indicating that we've reached our I guess, pre-recession level of jobs. But isn't it really correct that the only way we've gotten there is because more millions of people have not joined the workforce?
Well, that's kind of two different things. We've actually, in terms of actual employment, we have gotten back to where we were before the recession occurred, and we've started to grow some beyond that. So we began to set some more records. What you're talking about is the unemployment rate. When you look at the unemployment rate, which is now about 4.9%, you look at it and say, man, that looks great. That looks great, except for one thing, and that is there's been this dive in the number of people participating in the labor force. Because the unemployment rate is measured by asking people, by phone, actually a phone survey where you ask people two questions. Are you employed? If you say no, are you looking for work? And if you say yes, then you're counted among the official unemployed. But if you say I'm unemployed and no, I'm not looking for work, I've tried looking for work, I can't find a job, or I've got so many other things going good for me, free stuff, I'm getting a check, so why should I go to work? Then you're not counted among the unemployed. And so, and what has happened is it's just been this fairly significant dive in the number of people who simply have dropped out of the workforce.
Dr. Scott, I'd even heard that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that not only I'm not looking, but if you hadn't looked in 30 days, they say you're off of it. Is that right?
Well, I mean, it just depends on how you answer that question when you're called that month. Okay, if you say I am unemployed and I'm not looking for work, boom, you're not in the labor force.
Okay.
You got to be looking for work or employed to be in the workforce.
All right. So obviously we've had very low growth rate for the economy.
Right.
I've read what?
The growth rate of the economy?
Yes.
Yeah, it's been around 2%. 2% or less.
And can an economy even expand at 2%, or is it just barely keeping its head above water?
Well, it's expanding to 2%. It's not going. It's not zero, and it's not a number less than that. But it's just lethargic. It's plodding. It's plodding. This is what you expect to see in Europe. This is what Europe is like. Europe experiences this all the time. This is what Europe is like. See, a lot of people. I mean, that's what we've become. That's what we became in this last 8 years. We became more European. And if you look at Europe, here's what you'll find. You will find, if you look at all the countries in Europe, there are only 3 countries in Europe that have a higher per capita income than Louisiana. Louisiana.
Which is probably the lowest.
Germany, France, Italy, Spain. All these countries have lower per capita income than Louisiana. There are 3 countries. One is one is Switzerland, which has a very secretive banking laws, very low tax rates, and a very homogeneous population. The other is Norway, which has the North Sea oil, and the other is Luxembourg, which is about the size of East Baton Rouge Parish. Wow. And what they did about 10 years ago, they dramatically lowered their tax rates. They dramatically increased the secrecy of their within their banking system. And when they did that, boom, they went way up. They're actually the richest country, so to speak, in Europe. But all the rest are worse off than Louisiana. Why we want to mimic countries that are worse off than us is beyond me.
So it sounds like there might be the kernels of hope amongst these 3 in Europe that are doing better. But I know you know what needs to be done because you've seen it done in the past.
Right.
How do we get out of this? Since you told us what's wrong, how do we get out of this?
Well, I think the number one thing you have to understand 2 things. One of the things that differentiated this 8 years from other years is this tsunami of regulations that came up during this time period. You know, if you see anything that you think is unfair, you're going to create a law or regulation to correct that. And you may think those regulations were good to have, but you need to understand something. With every business, take principles of economics. Regulations shift the cost curves upward. They increase costs per firm. And anything that increases costs causes you to produce less output and use fewer workers.
Right.
So that's the first thing. The second thing was this emphasis on more and more taxes. That was the constant all the way from the minute you came in office. More and more taxes. You may think it's fair to have those taxes. That shifts the cost curves upward, causes people to produce less, and causes people to employ fewer people. So hopefully we're going to have a reversal in that coming forward.
Isn't there such a thing as the Laffer's curve?
Yeah, there is.
What is that? Can you explain it to folks?
Yeah, the Laffer curve kind of looks like this. I mean, basically it says there's a point where you can raise tax rates so much that you actually bring in less taxes. There's a point where you're raising rates, you're bringing in more, but after some point, when you raise rates too much, you actually get a decrease.
And what is that rate?
Well, it depends on It depends.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll continue this on the next segment. This is Locke Meredith with Dr. Loren Scott. We'll be right back.
It's time now for Legal Lines Tips with your host, Locke Meredith.
Hello, I'm Locke Meredith with a Legal Lines tip for you. Document your claim. What do I mean? Whenever you present a claim, whether it's for injuries in an automobile collision or for a breach of contract case or a business claim, it all boils down to documentation and evidence. For example, when you go to trial, basically both sides are presenting their evidence of what they believe to be their case. For example, also, if you're involved in an automobile collision, document the event. Talk to all the parties who are involved. Get their names, address, contact information, insurance info. Talk to the witnesses on the scene. Also get their contact information. Take photographs. With the phones we all have these days, everybody can take a picture and that paints 1,000 words. So document your claim. The Legal Lines tip from me, Locke Meredith, to you is document the claim.
This has been Legal Lines Tips.
Welcome back to Legal Lines. Again, I'm very pleased to have back on the show Dr. Loren Scott. He's a professor emeritus at LSU in economics, is recognized, frankly, all over the world. Dr. Scott, let's dive back in. So we were talking about there's this point where taxes, if they go up too high, people are going to figure out a way to lower them. Once they get down low enough that it's too much hassle to try and get them down, they'll pay it. Explain to the folks what that's about.
Well, there's this kind of weird law in the United States, and that is if you look from about 1950 to the present time period, people in the United States have basically decided they're going to give the federal government about 19% of their income in taxes. That's it. And so it doesn't, in a sense, it doesn't really matter what the marginal tax rate is from a revenue standpoint. When the tax rate was 91, top marginal tax rate was 91% under Eisenhower, what people did is they went to their local CPA or their attorney or whatever, and they said, find me some loopholes, find me some tax shelters. And they ended up paying 19%, okay? When Reagan dropped the rate to 28%, those same people said, I don't need you attorneys and accountants to tell me this. I'm just going to put, now it's 28%, I'm going to pay my taxes. And it ends up being about 9. It's this really odd thing. And so what that tells us is, number one, it doesn't matter what the top marginal tax rate is, you're going to get about 19% of the money out of the people of the United States.
Based on the economy.
Based on the economy, which tells us two things. It tells us, number one, that the problem with the deficit in the United States has not been and never has been a revenue problem. It has been a spending problem. If you look at a graph of revenues, that revenues are going just up like that, about 19% of real gross domestic product, as it turns out. But if you look at spending has especially skyrocketed in the last 8 years. It's been really bad in the last 8 years. That's what the problem is. And so you're not going to correct the deficit until you correct the spending side. But the top marginal tax rate doesn't matter so much to revenues. It matters a lot to growth, okay? So if you raise that top marginal tax rate, you slow down the economy for reasons I explained in the last segment. You shift the marginal cost curves upward, and people end up hiring fewer people producing less output. Or they leave, they go somewhere else. Or they ship their production overseas or something like that. And so you have to pay attention to the marginal tax rates because of its impact on growth.
It's interesting. Then why in the world would we pursue European policies that give us evidence of what you've just described?
Because your focus is no longer on growth. Your focus is on fairness. And when you switch your focus from economic growth to fairness, I'm going to be more fair of the distribution of income, et cetera, like that, you have given up growth. So you think, when you look at the income distribution in the United States, you think when you start focusing on fairness, you're going to go like this. You're going to move people closer together. That's not what happens. You go down like this. Everybody comes worse off. Okay?
Same disparity between the lowest and the highest.
You think you're closing it, but what you're doing is you're just making people worse off. That's why the people in Europe are worse off than people in Louisiana, okay? It's because they pursued a fairness policy. Now, what I'm hoping right now is President-elect Trump will move from a focus on fairness to a focus on economic growth, okay? Because when you do that, when you focus on growth, here's what happens. Okay, everybody goes up. Everybody
it makes
goes
sense.
Up.
So explain why economic growth is better for everybody. as compared to fairness?
Well,
I mean,
because an economic.
why is it that everybody improves, I guess, is my question.
First of all, the evidence that strongly supports this. I mean, you look at the United States, where we primarily focused on growth until the last 8 years. Guess what has happened? Everybody was going up like
Everybody's
this.
boat floats
the people
higher.
in the United States, the people in the United States, the poor, the people in the bottom 20%. By the way, you need to understand this thing called the income distribution is the most faulty measure of how a country takes care of the people down here that there is, because it's based on pre-tax earned income. It tells you nothing about how much money is taken from these people and given to these people. They'll tell you one thing about this. So people out there who are looking at the income distribution say, this is terrible. This is terrible, like an English professor at LSU, who's the head of the faculty senate, is so fond of saying, we got this terrible income distribution. Well, you steel-plated airhead, you're not an economist. You're looking at earned pre-tax income. There are trillions of dollars
being
taken from
down.
this group
That's right.
and moved to this group.
That's not reflected here.
When you look at consumption, all of a sudden things start coming together again. Okay?
So in other words, they're spending money the same way these guys are spending money. There's still a disparity.
Yeah,
but
there's a disparity.
It's not as big.
There is a disparity. But if you look at the amount of spending by people who are in the bottom 20% of the income distribution, their spending vastly exceeds their income, their earned income. The reason for that is there are trillions of dollars already being redirected from this end, but it doesn't show up. If you just look at the income distribution, it tells you nothing about how one country is taking care of its poor people.
I've always heard it described as being able to understand that the pie, the economic pie, so to speak, is not the same size no matter what.
Right.
That you can grow the pie bigger so more people have a piece of it and a larger piece of it if they work for it.
Exactly. Another economic growth, there are more jobs. So help you to get out of this, help you. That's one of the things that helps it grow down here is there are more jobs and there's more income.
Oh, okay.
That's why during this time period to focus on fairness, what happened to incomes? Incomes went down, they didn't go up. Or they grew slower.
So what do you envision based on Trump's campaigning and President-elect Trump seemingly to be appointing folks that are going to be consistent with that espoused goals?
Well, I expect two good things, and a third one that's extremely worrisome. The two good things are I expect tax rates to come down. That would be good.
Is that for everybody, businesses and individuals?
I think especially businesses and individuals as well. And when that happens, the cost curves come down, people produce more, hire more people. I think this tsunami of regulations that were written in by a president, not passed by Congress,
right.
You can unwrite those now, and I think that's going to happen. Again, that's going to lower the cost of running the business. You can produce more and hire more people. The worrisome thing is his position on international trade. And that is just, and unfortunately, this is a big mother, to use a technical economics term. There is a law in economics, and we use the law 3 times in economics that I'm aware of. And that's because we don't have any scientific evidence of this thing ever being violated. And that law is called the law of diminishing returns. Law of diminishing returns says when you raise tariffs between two countries, the standard of living in both countries goes down. When you lower tariffs and barriers to trade between countries, the standard of living in both countries goes up. A classic case of this is the North American Free Trade Agreement. Okay, there are winners and losers, but on the net you gain. And so when the North American Free Trade Agreement was passed, we lost the largest manufacturing employer in this state. We lost Fruit of the Loom, 11,000 people. But if you look at the period from 1990 to 2000, it was one of the greatest growth periods in Louisiana's history. Our per capita income, our employment grew very, very strongly. That's because we picked up all kinds of business.
Elsewhere.
We picked up all kinds of business in other areas.
Interesting.
So the problem here is that if you follow through, you need to understand that if you raise tariffs on foreign goods coming to the United States.
Explain to folks what a tariff is.
Okay, when I put a tax, we said we're not going to let Mexico compete with us in apparel. We're going to put a tax on apparel coming in from the United States.
So we're going to add to the cost of what you're paying. All right.
Yeah, and when you do that, they always retaliate.
All right, we'll continue this on the next segment. This is Locke Meredith with my special guest, Dr. Loren Scott. We'll be right back.
It's time now for Legal Lines Tips with your host, Locke Meredith.
Hello, I'm Locke Meredith with a Legal Lines tip for you. Document your claim. What do I mean? Whenever you present a claim, whether it's for injuries in an automobile collision or for a breach of contract case or a business claim, it all boils down to documentation and evidence. For example, when you go to trial, basically both sides are presenting their evidence of what they believe to be their case. For example, also, if you're involved in an automobile collision, document the event. Talk to all the parties who are involved. Get their names, address, contact information, insurance info. Talk to the witnesses on the scene. Also get their contact information. Take photographs. With the phones we all have these days, everybody can take a picture and that paints 1,000 words. So document your claim. The Legal Lines tip from me, Locke Meredith, to you is document the claim.
This has been Legal Lines Tips.
Welcome back to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith. Pleased to have back on the show Dr. Loren Scott. He's a professor emeritus at LSU. The field of economics, traveled all over the world. Let's dive back in. We're talking about the policies of Trump and kind of what we hope happens on a national level. Let me shift gears real quick. I'm kind of reading about the world economy, that it's sputtering and stuttering here and there. Europe looks like they're having all kinds of problems with Brexit and all that stuff. What's your analysis of the world economy and the EU, et cetera?
Well, I mean, they're in trouble. I mean, and you know, part of the reason for that is that, again, look at Europe. The socialism sounds really good on the surface, but as Margaret Thatcher put it very well one time, eventually you run out of other people's money. You run out of other people's money, and it really starts to fall apart. It really seems great if you're somebody from Hollywood or something like who doesn't know anything about economics. It all seems really great. You're a journalist. It sounds really great until you actually look at the evidence, and the evidence shows it doesn't work. You eventually run out of other people's money, and you know this is the United States is rare. I mean, the capitalism is a rare breed, and what we kind of tried in the last 8 years is try to move it more and more towards Europe, and we've reaped the benefits of that.
Which is
we've
not
reaped
good.
The whirlwind of that.
That's right.
And it has not been good, I don't think.
So the world, in essence, has become our customer in America for our products and services because of the various free trade agreements and such. What was your analysis of the TPP?
I don't know. Honestly, the TPP it has still not really been something I've looked at.
It's kind of dead now, right?
Well, I think it's probably dead now, but it was a very thick agreement. And I worry about it.
That's always scary.
I always worry about anything that's very thick. Anytime you see something like the Affordable Care Act,
right, yeah.
you know there's 2,000 pages long with a lot of statements that says that the Secretary of Health shall do all these things. I mean, anything that thick, you know, is going to have a lot of mischief in it. So I don't know. I hadn't had a chance to look at it.
You brought up an interesting concept here, and that is the effect of these policies at the federal level on businesses and how it's had a negative effect so far. Obamacare, as I understand, has been a pretty negative effect on employers.
Oh, it's just been, yeah.
It's another one of the taxes.
It's just been really horrible. And it's not just the effect on employers. I mean, I'm sure people like yourself who have insurance, right? Or suddenly look at it and say, what is happening to my rates? Well, you think about it. On the one hand, you say, look at this. We got 20 million new people being covered now with insurance. They're hardly having to pay anything. Who the heck is paying for that, do you think?
Right.
Do you think really that health care is free? There's no such thing as a free lunch. That's one of the primary laws in economics to remember. The reason your rates are going up is because you're paying the over cost of the 20 million people who are now getting free insurance. There's no such thing as free college. That's an absurd idea.
Agreed.
There's no such thing as that. Somebody has to pay for it. And one of the things that's happening is people are now looking at what the bill they're getting from Blue Cross, and they're wanting to say, this is Blue Cross. It's not Blue Cross's fault, okay? It's the ACA's fault, okay? You're covering 20 million people here in a way
and we're paying for them.
And we're paying for it. It is
That's
not
the
free.
bottom line. So I assume, being an economic expert, your model would be competition amongst many players, providing the services and giving people choice.
I would have done it different. I would give people vouchers. I think I would have given people vouchers and say, here, go buy your health insurance wherever you can get your health insurance. The voucher is going to cost a lot of money, but at least it wouldn't be driving our insurance rates up the way it is. We'd still end up paying for it.
Right.
Okay. When you give people free vouchers, it's not free. You still end up paying for it. But I like the market working it out a whole lot more than I like the federal government working it out.
Agreed.
It doesn't require a stack of paper this big to make a voucher
Makes
system
sense.
work. Yeah.
Let's shift gears. Let's talk about the state of the union for Louisiana. You know, as usual, it seems here for the last year after year, we were $1 billion short. We've been cutting services and taxes have been going up, and nothing seems to change here very much. So what is your recommendation?
Well, I mean, I'm very conservative. I have a tendency to want to look at spending, focus on the spending side. The problem on the spending side is that the way our budget is set up, you think it's a big pie, represents a state budget. 2/3 of that budget is protected from cuts, which is
A lot of it in the Constitution.
It's in the Constitution, and it's bad, because what happens is you can only cut two main areas, and that's higher ed and healthcare, and those two areas have really been hammered very, very hard. There's a group that's looking at tax reform and looking at what may be done there, and we'll just have to see what they come up with. My guess is they're going to come up with more taxes in some way, and I suspect not very much on the spending side to take place. And of course, the other thing that's hurting right now is that the state has been in a recession since August of 15, and the primary reason it's been in recession is because of oil prices.
Right.
You know, if you live in Houma, Houma has lost, the Houma metropolitan area, which is two parishes, has lost 10,000 jobs in the last 2 years. Lafayette's lost 16,000 jobs in the last 2 years. I mean, that's tough. Shreveport's lost, I don't know, another 1,000, as it turns out. And so that's been enough to pull down the state, even though Baton Rouge and Lake Charles are two of the fastest growing metropolitan areas in the country.
Now, why is that?
Well, the reason they're growing so fast is because very low price of natural gas. And the chemical industry is a huge consumer of natural gas. The price of natural gas is low here. It is not low in Europe. It is not low in Japan, where there are other chemical firms. And so the world demand for chemicals, this big pie that represents the world demand for chemicals, has not been growing very much because the world economies suck, as we've been talking about.
Right.
What is happening is our share has been growing like crazy because we're kicking the behinds of the European and Asian chemical firms. They can't possibly compete with us.
Because we make the product cheaper.
We can make it a lot cheaper. And the two places where you can do that, primarily making bulk chemicals, is on water where you have access to the world markets. And that's going to be on the Mississippi River, from the mouth of Mississippi up to the new bridge, up the old bridge in Baton Rouge, and then over the Lake Charles Channel. We have, in a really good year in the past, if we had $5 billion in industrial announcements, we'd have thought that was great. We have $135 billion.
Say that again?
$135 billion. In Lake Charles alone, $96 billion.
Now, who gets the benefit? I mean, who got all that billions here?
Well, I mean, you mentioned Sasol, and when we were off the record a while ago, Sasol is building a big facility over there. Sasol is a South African company.
How did we get these folks to come here?
Because they came here. We had low price natural gas. We had water. We had the Lake Charles. We had easy access to the natural gas too. We have enough miles of pipelines in the state of Louisiana to circle the globe 4.5 times.
Good gosh.
Okay, so we have access to the natural gas, and then we have access to water so that you can bring deep draft ships to haul bulk chemicals all over the world. So we brought to the table something that was perfect for them.
Excellent.
So we've been in a battle with Texas. Texas does the same thing.
So when we raise Texas people,
so we're fighting Texas all the time for this. Okay. It's mainly us in Texas that are fighting for these. They got the Houston Ship Channel. We got the cities right on the Gulf, and so they've got the same thing. We're just battling for them to see.
So what's your forecast for our state and particularly Baton Rouge? And
well, we think number one, the state is going to have another tough year next year because of oil. I don't see oil prices going up very much in the next year or so. So we think the drag of oil is going to keep us about flat.
Now, the Trump presidency, you anticipate will help? It's going
to help, but Trump presidency is not going to help the price of oil, unfortunately.
Okay.
But it'll help in other ways. So we think the state will be basically flat in employment next year, but then growing again, maybe 13,000 jobs in the next year after that. Baton Rouge, way different. We think Baton Rouge will add about 9,000 over the next 2 years.
Fantastic.
Pleasure.
Dr. Scott,
okay.
I really appreciate you being on the show. This is Locke Meredith with my special guest, Dr. Loren Scott. Thank you for being with us.